This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a survivor, a disruptor, an Air Force veteran, a determined philanthropic leader. She has always been fascinated with the good in the world, from healing creams to healing others. Her passions became a way of life for her after dealing with personal loss, not only once, but 3 times over in the course of months. Today, she strives to help government agencies and communities build affordable housing for working families. She is the chief visionary of COBA, C-O-B-A, US Inc. Please welcome Michele Williams,
Great.
Dr. Tiny.
Yes, thank you. That was very good. I like the creams. That was a really clever thing.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought that was a really neat story that you shared about your upbringing and your dad. So if you're good with that, let's start there.
Yeah. Some people, they go through life and they never know what they wanted to do. Well, I knew what I wanted to do. When I was 10, my dad was burned in a manhole. He was an electrician. And he was the second guy out. The first guy out, he lived. My dad was in the hospital, 30% burned, and the guy behind him, those 3 of them, he died. Mm. So my dad was in the hospital for a long, long time. And this was like right when skin grafting was becoming a thing for burn patients. And my mother had 2 babies at home. And so she would send me to walk down to the pharmacy and go to the pharmacist, give the prescription, and I would look over the counter and watch Herb. That was his name. You know, the mortar and pestle. And I mean, it was just like fascinating. And he weighed everything, and he had this really cool scale. And after that experience, and this was over, I would go down there every other day. It was great. And finally, one day he said, "Come on back, nobody's around." And he brought me back into the pharmacy, and I'm just like looking at all these pills and bottles. And this is 1972. So that wasn't significantly as many pharmaceuticals as we have now. And I said at that time, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a pharmacist. And that's what I became.
That's incredible. And a little bit about your father, because you kind of glazed over it, but he was working in, I guess, in the sewers of New York City, Delaware.
We're from Wilmington.
And
yes, he was a electrician, cable splicer.
Okay.
And they were down there fixing something. The power was out, and something blew.
An explosion
In the manhole.
And he survived this. Yeah,
and they told him that if he wasn't in really good shape, that he was, because he used to play tons of sports, that he would have perished.
Wow, that's incredible. And you mentioned also that he was actually in the hospital for over a year's time.
Yep.
What was that experience like for you as a child?
Well, my uncle kind of stepped in, and he actually taught me how to play football, like not soccer, but football. And I think he wanted really a boy even though I do have an older brother. And I remember specifically this, and my dad actually, we have talked about, when he was still alive, we actually talked about this. When he came through that door home, and I was sitting there, and he walked in kind of like this, because imagine a tank top. Where the tank top was, he wasn't burned, but everything else was. So he had a constant tank top on, because of the burns. And he walked in like this, and his face was all damaged because the side of his head and his hair were damaged. And I screamed because I didn't know who he was. And I didn't believe that it was my father. And I ran in and I hid in the bedroom. And that affected him as well. And he was so devastated. He had no idea. And I had no idea about a year had gone past, more
Right.
than a year had gone past. And that was really difficult. And it took a while for me to start to, make fun of him again. You know how
enjoy each
yeah,
other.
and that was a while. And then even when he was at home, it was every other day to the doctors and outpatient. And he was a Marine veteran, so he was at the VA hospital a lot too. So that was difficult.
Yeah. I believe that you drew such strength from that moment, though, from that time.
Yes. And I probably said to myself, if nobody prepares me for the disasters of life, I just got to go with them.
Yeah. I'm relating
I
that to some of your journey today.
And that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Nobody in life tells you that when this happens, when your dad walks through the door, this is what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're supposed to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody tells you that. Would that have made a difference to me? Probably not, because I'm kind of stubborn and, set in my ways even at age 10. I want to be a pharmacist, and that's what I became. And yeah, so even through life, I can see all those challenges that going through them, like you hate going through them. But when you get through them on the other side, and even when you're going through them, that you think there's not another side, and then there is, and you're like, wow, this is so much better than I would have ever expected.
And become so strong. And like you said, too, is even if you are prepared, I mean, first of all, there's never, what is the right answer, right? There's never a right answer. We don't know what the right answer is. What happened was what needed to happen for that moment for both of you to go through that experience, to learn how to, for him to, now his daughter shared something with him that now he knows when he approaches strangers and everything, maybe there's a different approach for him and for him to build the tolerance to be able to deal with adversity now that the way people are going to look at him. Another thing you mentioned in there is that your father was a Marine. And so what I want to understand is, how did you end up in the Air Force?
So my dad was only in the Marine Corps for just a little while. And I was finishing up pharmacy school, and you know how they have those big job fairs?
Yep.
So I'm going around the tables, and I was in I was living in I went to school in Pittsburgh, and I said, I want to live in South Carolina. Who knows why? I just wanted to. Well, I'm going around the tables looking to see if any hospitals are there, and I come upon a recruiter. Nobody told me about recruiters. So if a recruiter tells you something, I'm thinking he's telling me the truth.
A military recruiter.
Yes.
Right.
So I go up to him, and he said, oh, do you have a job for after you graduate? And I said, no, I'm looking. I want to go to South Carolina. Oh, we have bases there. Oh, okay, great. Here, and then, are you familiar with the Air Force, the military? No, not at all. And so he gave me the packet. I filled it out and then went through this whole thing, did the commissioning. And then September, I'm at medical indoctrination for military indoctrination for medical service officers. It's called MIMSO. They don't even have it anymore. And it's where all the medical trained people go through training. Imagine a bunch of senior doctors, nurses. We don't even know how to march. I mean, it was just a great experience. It was 2 weeks. That was my military training of 2 weeks. Wearing a uniform.
That was your boot camp.
That was my boot camp. 2 weeks.
And so it turned out to be the Air Force.
Yeah. And
your dad didn't have anything to say about that. He was okay with it?
Yeah. My dad was always so proud of me, anything that I did. I remember in college, I prayed for a D-.
Oh, boy.
In just so I didn't get an F.
Oh, okay.
And my dad said, hey, you got your report card? And I showed it to him, and he said, a D? You've never gotten a D. And I said, well, there's always a first time. And he said, but it's still a good report. I'm proud of you. So he was proud of all of his, I have 3 other siblings, but one has died. And so he was proud of all of us.
Yeah. In any way, in any light.
Yeah.
I only make the jokes, the subtle jokes, because my father is Army. He was a Green Beret.
Wow.
And he shares in common with you. He was on the medical side as well. So he was a medic in Vietnam. And so a different experience, I think, for medics as well, because you know that you're there and you're holding the hands of the people as they're passing a lot of the times, and something that I didn't realize until I was much older. But you know, definitely. Anyway, but I thought it was comical because, you know, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, they all like to have this.
We have jokes about each other's service.
Exactly. Yep. And it's all the same joke, right?
Yeah,
it's how
pretty
many,
much.
Right? It's how many Marines does it take to screw in a light bulb? How many Air Force does it take to screw in a light bulb? It's all the same joke. But
you can always tell a Marine, but you can't tell them much.
Right. There you go. Yeah. And I'm sure they have the same ones for the Army ones. So back to our memories about her, because what's amazing is that at 10 years old, this fascination drew you in, and it stayed with you. Now, something that I didn't know was that her brought you behind the counter, and so you got to experience it in a different way, and then obviously see it through as a pharmacist. That experience of him taking you and you almost shadowing him, was that one time? Was that often?
Well, if nobody was around, then he was allowed to let me in the back.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, this is 1972. All the rules were a little different.
Yeah.
And every time he brought me back, and I just watched.
What was it that he saw from you? What he obviously saw some curiosity from you.
Yeah, and I would ask him, you know, what's this for? And why does the scale look like that? And how do you measure that? And how much do you know? Like, I just gave you this piece of paper. How do you know what to put in there? It was written in Latin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, back then. And he explained it to me, you know, the drams and, you know, the old way of measurements, no metric thing,
right,
and no pounds, although there was some pounds. And then I'd say, well, how do you know what cream to pick? And then he would explain, well, burn patients need a lot of water. And then some people need some drying creams. And this one is going to add moisture to your dad's skin. This one's going to make sure it's not infected. This one helps for itch. And I just was thinking, wow, they all look the same and they do different things.
He was very patient, it sounds like, too.
He was very patient.
To answer all these questions.
Yes.
Was there maybe some empathy as well from him? Did he know your dad?
He did not know my dad. He knew my mom.
So he was just a patient man.
He was just a really great thing. And I don't know if I even told you the rest of the story about Herb.
You did. I want to just stay 1 second on this patience thing. Is we're working on one of the business associations I'm a part of in the area here in New Paltz. We're working on an idea of bringing students in and shadowing business owners. And I had brought it up because the president of the college had said that there's a disconnection between the students and the community. And so I thought of, rather than internship, because, you know, internships for credits and there's an application and there's a whole, what if we just brought the students in to shadow the business owners? Like, what kind of impact do you think that would have? And you're just like highlighting the impact that it might have. So I think that's so cool that he let you shadow him and was so patient with you and sharing with you and relating it back to what your dad needed and everything. So tell us the rest of this story.
The other thing about Herb, a lot of people wouldn't have put up with a 10-year-old girl.
That's what's interesting.
And he was a normal person. You know, he wasn't a school teacher. He was just a regular old pharmacist. So I was a pharmacist and I was at a national conference. And it was about 1996, so 72 to 96. And I, at this point, had been traveling. So we were at this pharmacy conference, and they wanted to try something cool. So there's thousands of people there. They had 50-some-odd tables, each with your state name. And I'm in uniform. And I saw Delaware, and because that's where I was licensed. And in the military, you're allowed to keep that license. So I went there, I sat with the Delaware people, and they were asking me about the military. And then they said, well, how did you ever work in Delaware? And I said, no, I didn't really work in Delaware except my internship. And they knew who I interned with. And I said, but you know what? I do want to ask you about one guy. When I was 10, I told him the story, and his name was Herb. And every single person knew him. And he was still practicing to that day. Yes. And I said, if you ever see him, please make sure that you let him know what a big impact it was. And then a couple years later than that, my sister was working as a pharmacy technician. And guess who the pharmacist was? And he must have been in his 80s at this point.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
So she worked for him. So did you get to see him finally?
No, because I was overseas or in California, or I never really got back
to see
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How amazing. But he obviously got the story from somebody, especially your sister.
And my sister told him.
Yeah, of course, as your sister did.
Yeah.
How incredible. And I'm sure you were an inspiration to your sister to become a technician in the pharmacy.
Maybe.
So it passed through in so many different ways. I think of It's a Wonderful Life. And the little boy, do you remember he's working in the pharmacy and everything? So that experience is what comes to mind when you're sharing the story about being a 10-year-old. It's incredible the impact that people have on our lives. And I think sometimes is overlooked from the people that are creating that impact. They don't even know it. So it's so nice that story got back to him.
Yeah.
And we have this opportunity now to create an impact. Another funny thing that you had shared off air about the story is when you were 10, you thought he was old.
I know. He was probably like 35 or something. Yes, I know.
And I'm 40, and my daughter who's 7, Denise, said to me that I was old. So I was just like, it's all about interpretation. Where you're at, where are you, right? Yeah, to 7 and 40. Yeah, that's pretty
that's
old,
funny.
I guess, right? Yep. But I'm sure he was probably in his late 50s or early 60s or something, right? It's pretty incredible. So you had this wonderful experience now as a pharmacist, and I guess you must have seen something that was not going right in your community and in the world. And so you decided to start applying yourself and your skills, and you ended up going to University of Phoenix to get your PhD,
MBA,
right? And then you also wanted to further that in order to help rewrite policy.
Yeah.
Could you share some of that experience, and also the online learning experience? I think is also important.
Okay, yeah. So even though I always wanted to be a pharmacist, 2 years into it, I came to the conclusion that, wait a minute, pharmaceuticals are not the answer for everybody, because you take this drug and you have a side effect, and you take another drug to combat the side effect, yada, yada, and on and on. And people were taking like boatloads of pharmaceuticals. And I said, wait a minute, there's got to be another healthier way. There's diet and exercise and meditation and herbs and the whole thing. And I went down the road of education on herbal and holistic medicine, homeopathy, massage, and fell in love with aromatherapy. And then when I was living overseas, of course, I really got heavy into aromatherapy, because that's what they do. They had the health service. They could be waiting forever with a cold, just to get a prescription for something. So they do a lot of self-help. So I didn't know what to do with this, because by this time I had done like 10 years in active duty, and I was at a crossroads. Do you go on another 10 or do you jump ship? Well, I rode the middle and said, I think I'll go reserves. Well, I ended up coming back on active duty. But anyway, now that I'm in the reserves, I have this education and this knowledge and this passion for healing. And I know all these pharmaceuticals, but now I know all these holistic modalities. How do I do something with that? And I'm very analytical, so the only thing I knew what to do, I didn't have another mentor, is I went and got my MBA. And then I opened a store in California. It was called the Aroma Shop, and it was like the country store where everybody hung out because it smelled nice and it sounded good. And I was coaching people through looking at their pharmaceuticals and transitioning over to, other healthier modalities, even if it was just nutrition. And so we did that for a few years, and then 9/11 hits, and then I get called back to active duty. So now I'm at a point, I'm deployed, and I backfilled an active duty guy who went to Iraq. And then I backfilled him again when he went to Afghanistan. But anyway, because I was a reservist, I was put back on active duty. I backfilled him in his position here. It was actually in Maryland. And I had to make a decision at that point. Do I hire people to run my store? And I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. So I closed down my store. I put 120% back into the military because now you're downsized because you've got so many people overseas fighting a war and you're here managing in country what still needs to go on. And so anyway, that's how I kind of got off active duty. And then when I was rounding about 50, I was still on active duty. And I said, you know what? I have 50 more years of my life to live. What am I going to do? I just asked that question to the universe. Lord, give me a sign. All right. And I sat with it and sat with it. And then what happened is the Affordable Care Act came out. And like the nerd, I read it.
Word for word.
Yes. And I realized that it had nothing to do with healthcare and it was everything to do with insurance. And so I said, darn it, I wish I could write better policy. I think that's what I'm going to do. I woke up the next morning and I said, geez, how do I learn how to write policy? And I signed up for my PhD. And then I did my dissertation on the effect of where one lives matters. Your health, your zip code should not dictate your health outcomes. So I tied in everything from health and holism and real estate and policy. And I realized that most things that are wrong in the world are based on bad policy. And if you go back, it's not necessarily a person. It's the policy and the unintended consequences, or maybe the intended consequences. And so now we're seeing 50 years later, even when it comes to real estate, zoning laws that were put in place 50 years ago are now prohibiting us from developing affordable housing. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Well, that's certainly a conversation I'd like us to talk more about because that's part of what COBA...
Connect, Organize, Build, and Advance Healthy Community Development. Yeah.
I mean, that's part of and which is a non-for-profit, by the way, for our listeners here. Before we dig into there, I have a few questions about the aroma shop.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool. One of the things I noticed when I first met you outside was I did smell an aroma off of you, a beautiful aroma, by the way, I must say. But I knew it wasn't a perfume.
No.
And it was more of like an oil of some sort. Could you want to share a little bit what it is and maybe how it helps or what it does?
I think this one that I don't normally wear perfume like in this setting or in church or where there's a lot of people or where if I'm alone, I can bathe in it. But it's probably a lotion that I made with shea butter because it's now, I went on that walk, so my skin was a little dry. And so it's probably a lotion of, I think it might have probably had sandalwood in it or lavender.
I'd probably smell the lavender, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just something that I threw together. But I used my pharmaceutical skills to make that lotion.
Yeah, you just said that too, that you made the lotion. And so you're very in tune with that. And I noticed also your necklace and the rock on there. So very in tune with this spiritual and aromas and this mental and this mindset and everything. So what I'm curious about in the aroma shop is you mentioned coaching people through coming off of medications and going. Could you share a little bit more about what that's like?
Yeah. So you have somebody, diabetes, we'll just talk about that because that's a pretty significant part of our population now. And they usually were on 2, 3, maybe even 4 pharmaceuticals with a lot of side effects. So they would come to me and say, what kind of vitamins can I use? What kind of herbs can I use? And it's not just a panacea that you take something. It's a lifestyle change. And it's a lifestyle change that you have to be able to maintain. And that's why it's difficult because if you're in a family that's not supportive, like I'm vegan, 100% plant-based and have been for decades. So when people come into my world, they're afraid to eat meat around me. Hey, what you do with your body, I don't agree with you, but I'm not going to do it. And then they always like my meals better. And they always, of course, it's always a lecture about, not even a lecture, it's educating on why plant-based nutrition is healthy. Anyway, so it's difficult for people to change lifestyle when the people around them don't. So with diabetics, they don't want to take the pharmaceuticals because of the side effects, but yet they want to do something to lower their sugar levels. Mm-hmm. And so it was a matter of, there are herbs and nutraceuticals that do that, help with diabetes in several different ways. And they could even just bring down your dose of your pharmaceutical. And that happens a lot. And then what happens is once the person starts to get healthy, even feel better because their drug doses are coming down so low and no side effects, minimal side effects, they realize, it's all I have to do is, something lifestyle, and then they're off. I mean, I was a Food for Life nutrition. I used to demo how to cook from the Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine. They have a program, Food for Life, and it's teaching people how to transition from, regular health, eating to 100% plant-based or thereabouts. So it's teaching people, you're doing all this cooking and you're saying, well, a mango is good for, and, kale is good for while you're cooking. It was kind of cool. Anyway,
you're educating while cooking.
Exactly. So, so where was I going with that?
You were just sharing about the lifestyle change and plant.
So, right. So now through that experience, I took my old patients, in my head, and then I said, okay, how do I, as a pharmacist, now integrate that experience into the plant-based nutrition conversation and focus it on diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and involve an exercise, just throwing in, just an idea, just planting a seed. I'm not a zealot. I don't say, you're not going to eat any meat around me. People in my household bring in stuff. It's theirs. It's just not for me. So if you can just plant seeds, and then the more seeds, and it grows and grows, and then they contact you, and then they say, hey, I heard you on the radio, or I went to your lecture at the library, or I saw you on TV when you did whatever. And it's so great because you're planting a seed and you don't know who's going to eat that seed or not, and how it's going to flourish.
And I like that you call it a lifestyle too. It's not a diet, because I think diets are like fads. They come and go. And when it's a lifestyle change, it's something that you've decided to do and that you're committed to doing, not just for the short term, but for the long term, not just to solve the diabetes problem or the weight loss problem or whatever it is that you're having, but to just live a healthier, better life. I think that's really cool. I am interested in the question of why plant-based is healthier. And I asked that truly as a question, not with any...
So, we used to think that a lot of diseases was because of fat content or sugar content, and that's true. But we're finding a lot more disease is caused by inflammation. And the more oils, saturated oils that you consume, omega-6s, the more you have inflammation. And that's why you always see the combo of arthritis, diabetes, hypertension. You see them not somebody just has high cholesterol. They usually have high cholesterol and arthritis. There's something there. And even inflammation around the heart is an issue for heart disease. Not high blood pressure, but heart disease. And you see an incidence of that. Whether it's kidney disease, all of this has an inflammatory factor to it. And so what a plant-based diet does, it's just natural. It doesn't, I don't cook with olive oil. I cook with no oil whatsoever. And that's a whole nother thing to learn how to do that.
It comes from an olive tree.
That's true. But no, you're right. I get that all the time. And it's because it's concentrated fat.
Okay.
And it's the concentrated fat. A little bit is a little bit okay. I guess a little bit's okay.
Right.
But is a tablespoon of olive oil on your vegetables okay? No, that's going to increase, even though it's an omega 3, a little bit of 9. You still have the bad omegas in there, and it's just the constant bombardment of what we eat on a normal basis that has those trashy foods in there, the trashy oils. We used to talk about trans oils. We don't talk about trans oils anymore because now they're all hydrogenated, yada,
They
yada.
find a new name, yes,
Yeah.
yes. What you're saying is actually interesting to me. I finally got blood work done. My wife's been kind of like on me a little bit about like, you got to go get a physical. You're 40 now. You got to get a physical. So I finally got one done, and I'm in pretty good shape, and I eat pretty healthy. We actually don't eat too much meat. We probably only eat meat once a day, and with our dinner, and it's not as substantial. Not like when I was growing up, where we'd have meat in the morning, in the afternoon, and at dinner, or even when I moved out on my own, I used to have bacon sandwiches for breakfast because I thought it was so cool to be able to have. Still have bacon from here and there, but anyway, the point that I'm making is that being a healthy eater, a lot of my protein shakes are plant-based and everything. My triglyceride levels still came back very high above. I mean, everything was fine. And overall, I'm fine and there was no issues. But those came back above normal. And I thought that was very interesting. I haven't had a chance to go back and speak with my doctor, but I feel like, do these omega-3s play into that?
Triglycerides are interesting.
I use a lot of olive oil, so.
Well, I don't want to ask you your LDL to HDL ratio.
I don't think I know it off the top of my head. But
so triglycerides are high for a lot of reasons. One is it's a family thing, and that's truly hereditary. Very, it's often, and when they're high. Right. Like over 400, I'm talking.
No, mine were good. Mine weren't that high.
Okay.
But I was in a safe zone, let's put it that way.
And a lot of triglycerides are high because of the consumption of sugar. Whether it's natural sugar or sugar, it's just the constant bombardment of...
Which is found somewhere because it's interesting. I don't eat sugary snacks other than a dessert after dinner.
You eat fruit?
Yeah, I love fruit.
You eat,
There you go, right? There it is. There it is. All the raisins, dates, figs.
Oh, then you're concentrated sugar.
Goodness.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. People think that's healthy.
Right.
But everything is healthy. Well, maybe not everything to a degree. And you talked about, your plate. I grew up in the same family, and I haven't eaten meat since I was about 12. And that's another Micheleism. I'm not doing this, and I didn't do it. So even if you had this is why the Chinese, Japanese, Koreans have better health outcomes, is they eat a little tiny piece of meat and vegetables and grains. Yeah. Fill up the majority. And now all our lifestyle diseases are diseases of affluence, because now those countries are seeing animal products as products for the wealthy. And that's what's changed. And
it's shifted the plate, the portions on the plate. Yeah, we actually use smaller plates at home now. And for that reason, that was another big one. And smaller portions on the meat. There's some really great documentaries about our meat and our sources of meat. I mean, we can go down a whole rabbit hole on that, but I was very interested in your plant-based healthy eating. And I think that is very significant. I also love the fact, you bring your pharmaceutical side into into everything that you do. In fact, even into making lotions, which my father also is like a side chemist and makes. And when you said shea butter, we have a big tub of shea butter in the garage, and he would make all these different types of lotions and balms and all this other stuff. So it's really cool. I'm gonna have to hook you up with him. The two of you can go off and make some lotions together. So I'm interested back to this whole policy thing and just as like a self-awareness for all listening, in that this isn't anything political and there's no agendas here other than trying to help people who are working class citizens and are just trying to have a home and live somewhere. And in my understanding from what you've shared so far and prior is that there are laws on the books, there are policies on the books that somebody made years ago or recently, whichever the case. Maybe they knew or maybe they didn't know the impact that it would have on these working class families. And part of what you're trying to do and working hard to do is help these government agencies, help these communities understand their policies, help them rewrite these policies so that you can come in and help them build these tiny homes, which I want to hear more about, to be able to help these these working class families go from, as you said, from dirt to home.
Dirt to keys.
Dirt to keys, thank you, which I love. So if you could share a little bit more about that process and the work that you're doing with these government agencies and how that looks.
Yeah. So in fact, we just had a conference on Wednesday, and we need to move. And I was approached, okay, now we got to take this seriously and move further. You're going to say, you said tiny houses. That is one solution. It is not the solution. It is a possible solution. So just want to clarify that. So I review what, if you came to me and you were planning and zoning, or you were just a consumer, and you wanted to build a tiny house, just say, well, I would pull your county ordinances, and first I'd say what the minimum size house would have to be. Ours in the county where I live is 343 square feet. I can go to the next county or the next municipality 10 miles away, and their minimum size is 1,100 square feet.
Right.
So therefore, that immediately knocks out a tiny house option, or even a small house option, because you think about it, if you're, I'm not advocating or promoting single mobile homes, but if you look at one of those are about 600 to 700 square feet. So
they wouldn't be able to.
Yes. So, and anything, and my focus is anything that's affordable. And there is not one state in this country that doesn't have an affordability issue. It's all varying degrees, how bad or better.
And you're speaking to Delaware, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm speaking right now. If I'm just giving you an example.
In terms of the county that you use as example.
Yes, I'm from Sussex County,
okay.
And I live in Lewis, down by and I'm in a high rent area. And what we experience, and I say this because a lot of communities look like this. On the east side is your big homes, your businesses, your boardwalks, your ocean, your bay. And so the people that move there are not usually middle income. All right. And then there's where we live, like right outside of that. But what about these people that live here? Who services the restaurants and the hospitals and the schools and the post office? Workers. Where do they live? So
literally on the other side of the tracks.
Yes. So how did that come to be? And so when you dive into policy and somebody comes up to me and says, my mom has a big yard, huge yard, and it's in Lewis, it's right on the beach, and I want to put an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And think of a mother-in-law suite for right now. But you could think of a tiny house on wheels as an accessory dwelling unit. So I say, okay, well, let's look at your policies. And this is me alone looking at this. I have a few people that we look through them and we say, okay, well, this zoning isn't going to let you do this. This building code isn't going to let you do this. This set-asides or parking restrictions aren't going to let you do that. And so this person now has lost out an opportunity to go and live near where they work, play, pray. Yeah.
How do you change that?
So then what I do is make an appointment with anybody I can get in to see, any level of the county council. And
town supervisors, mayors.
Anybody. And whether it's an elected official or not, it doesn't matter. And that's where my military skill comes in. I used to work at the Surgeon General's office. That was my last assignment. And at that point, I learned how to negotiate, when to talk, when not to talk, what to say, what not to say. And so now it's really easy for me to have a conversation with an elected official or with a county councilman, county council person, to say, I want to help you with your affordable housing issue. I want to make you a housing hero. And these are to say. Yes, and this is my steps. And if you want help, this is what I've already done for you. And it's I might have a little report written up for them. But my thing is, if I do hard work on policy and allow everybody, like this girl who wants to have a tiny house in her mom's backyard. Then if the policy is fixed, think of all those people that can put tiny houses in their backyards for accessory dwelling units. And think about COVID, when people lost their jobs and then they went into forbearance. And then COVID ends and forbearance ends. They didn't get their job back. What happens after forbearance? It's called foreclosure. Now, what if you were to rent out your backyard, put a tiny house back there, or a mother-in-law suite, or a garage apartment, and rent that space out for $200, $300, $400 a month? That's your bump
Income.
up for your mortgage. So you keep the first place of affordable housing is keeping people in their houses. And I also started a Fuller Center for Housing of Delaware, because a lot of the houses that are condemned only might need a simple thing, like fixing plumbing, and I'm saying simple, but it's not simple for the person that lives there, because it could be an elderly person. They can't get up on a roof and patch a little hole, but we can. And so it's a community can come together and do these little fixes and keep people in their homes. So strategies like that's low-hanging fruit. What do you already have available to keep people in their house and tell people that are struggling just by one little change? So what rules and what policies and what ordinances are prohibiting you from doing all of that? That's what I do.
And how does money end up changing some of the conversation? And what I mean by that is the question of, you have this affluent area and affluent people in this area, and they don't want to see the policy change because they don't want to see their neighborhood change. And to some extent, we can understand and appreciate that, because property values and investments change due to changing a neighborhood, right?
I'm so glad that you said that, because
I had to.
and that is the biggest falsehood. And there's several studies that document that. What you're talking about is NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And what we did, we have a group, Sussex County group, and we started a Yes in My Backyard campaign.
Yeah, I was wondering what YIMBY was. Nice.
And so we go to
Very cool.
We go to these places that are affluent or not in my backyard, and we explain to them how housing is everyone's issue. You might have a house and you might love where you live, but are you going to complain when you're waiting 45 minutes till the waitress is going to come over and serve you? Who do you think that is? It's somebody that can't live in that community. So that's why a lot of resort areas are losing their workforce because they can't afford to live.
Or the service industry is suffering right now.
Yes, big time. Yep. Look at all the restaurants that used to be open 7 days a week. Now they're open 5. They used to be open 9 to 9. Now they're open 9 to 5. So you're getting a lot of not only closures, but shortening of hours just because there's not the workforce. And why isn't there the workforce? Is because you don't have anywhere to house them. And you don't have, and then what they do is they go to a lower housing pricing that could be 45 minutes away. So they're driving now 45 minutes away to go to your $9.25 job, which is minimum in Delaware. It's going to be raised to $15, and then they're driving back. And now at $3.50 at gas, these people, they're not making money, period.
Those are Delaware gas prices, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I saw some of the ones when I was driving up here. Oh, boy.
You get a gas card for coming.
So anyway, it's a community issue. Like when you go to the doctor's office, who is behind there checking you in? All those people who cleans the floor?
Right.
And think about all those people.
Where do they live? How far do they commute?
And then this group will complain because traffic is a mess. Yeah. So let's make housing near where you work, learn, live, and pray and play. That's it. And so how do you do that? That's the problem. And there's a lot of facets of why.
Well, and you brought up community earlier, which I really appreciated as well, in that, you brought up, let's say, a house that has an issue, a plumbing issue or a roofing issue or something, and the community coming together to fix it. And part of what we're talking about here is some misconceptions and, these empty rooms shouting and saying, but this is going to affect me in this way, right? And we hear, there's a lack of community, but this is a way, what you're speaking to is a way to bring community together to where we have a mixture now of classes, of money, of having the affluent bring in the middle class and the working class and living together in a harmonious way, and being able to help each other when the plumbing breaks or when a roof needs patching, to come in and help each other, because that will actually increase our property value, because now we no longer have this house that's on foreclosure on our road. This house is actually just fine. And the people living in it are no longer going into forbearance or foreclosure, as you mentioned, because they were able to put a tiny house and actually bring in somebody who now is helping the restaurant locally, who we've been complaining about waiting 45 minutes for a table, and now we can get in 20 minutes.
You got it.
So it all kind of is this beautiful cycle of community, which we all dream about having. So I commend you for that work.
Yeah, and the Fuller Center, it's the same gentleman that started Habitat for Humanity was
you were mentioning
Millard Fuller.
This. Yes.
He started the Fuller Center for Housing. And I went on a bike ride, they call them Bike Adventures. It's their major fundraiser. And it was from Nashville, Tennessee to Natchez, Mississippi, 444 miles along the Natchez Trace. Yeah, in a week. And as we were riding, we were sleeping in churches, and the community would say, this needs to be fixed. We would spend the night, get up the morning, fix those houses, get on our bikes, and go to the next town that needed us.
That's cool.
All along the Natchez. And when on the way home, Jay and I were like, why don't we do this in Delaware? Let's see if Delaware has one. And they didn't. So I said, we need a Fuller Center for Housing of Delaware. So I started to do it. And then Jay, my husband, was hit and killed by a cyclist. He was he was cycling and the car hit him. So my life kind of went in that trauma, horrible, I'm not doing anything, I need to refocus. And that was just the beginning. I didn't even know that there was some more coming along my way. So I paused basically starting that organization until 2021. And so now we've got, we're on the bike adventure route coming through Lewis and working on some projects.
That's really
next
cool.
Year.
I would like to hear a little bit more about Jay and how you met. Yeah.
So my last assignment was in Arlington, Virginia. And at that time, they were taking the I-66, and it used to be 2 lanes here and 2 lanes here, and then now they're making 5 lanes here and 5 lanes here. So it was always congested. And I just really was hating life. So I make a long story short, I said, when was the last time I was really, really, really happy? And I said, I was 23 years old living in Lewis.
Yeah.
I was up and gone.
Wow.
So I started riding with the cycling club. I had been riding with Oxon Hill and Potomac Peddlers, and there's Annapolis Cycling Club. And so I started riding with the Sussex Cyclists. And there was a guy, Jay, who was more of a fanatic than I was, did more miles, and he was just a lot of fun.
Which, by the way, she has a custom seat and custom bike.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. So, yeah, well, you figure over the cost of your life and the cost of the bike, it's an insurance, but saves you money on your health insurance. I can justify it anyway.
100%.
Yep. So we just started becoming best friends, and then his wife died of Parkinson's. And then my mother died, and she was one of the diabetics with heart disease, and I'm too old to change. My diet.
Mom was like
yes.
that. Yep.
And so that's what you hear. And then, of course, you can tell them, you can lead them to water, but that's it. So anyway, we just kind of we're hanging out nonstop. And so one day I was going to Las Vegas, and he said, can I come? And I said, it was a business meeting. I said, sure, come on. We brought our folding bikes, got on the plane, and he said, hey, we're in Las Vegas. You want to go get married?
Wow.
And I said, we're not doing anything else today. So that's what we did. And we were in bike clothes. We got our license the first day. And then the next day we were, we didn't do one of those, those chapels. So we went to the Justice of the Peace. I guess that's what it's called. And we were in bike outfits. We had our folding bikes. We brought them into the room
Are
with
they
us.
Hans, the folding bikes?
No, we didn't have. He had a Schwinn, and I forget the make of mine. So we brought him in, and here's the funny thing: there's like a line of people that are doing this. So the couple before you that got married, you stand in for them, and the couple behind us stand in for us. Both of those people on each side all were cyclists.
Oh, wow.
And they
just by chance.
Just by chance. And they thought it was the coolest thing because we were in bike clothes.
Yeah, spandex.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So that was fun. So anyway, he was just, he was my hero. He was a riding fanatic. And he was so involved in my life and what I would do, and just really a super great human being. And the only bad thing and it's not even really bad.
He ate meat. No.
He used to say, yes, he used to say, when Michelle's at a meeting, Jay's out eating. And that's when he would go out and eat whatever. And then he would say, oh, you wouldn't believe what I had tonight, bratwurst. And oh gosh. So anyway, so he, so that's when we did this Fuller Center ride.
And what kind of work did he do?
He was a computer technician, a TV technician, then a computer technician, had his own business, and then retired. Oh, so he was retired, and he was loving life. And
he was enjoying this with you. It's interesting, but you had shared values in building this Fuller House community together. What were those conversations like when you were talking about building this with him?
We were driving back from Nashville.
Yeah.
And that was the end of the trip. And it was really funny. I was driving, he was sitting here. And at the same identical time, we both did one of these and said,
looked over at each other.
Why don't we have one of those in Delaware?
Wow.
And it was exactly what I was thinking. And so we went back to Delaware and started working on it. And it was just that we saw a need for the community. And this was like not only a great thing to do for cyclists and not only a great thing for the community, but it fixed people's houses so they can remain there.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then so in 2019, obviously he passes as you had mentioned. So the idea of everything goes on pause for you. And I'm assuming what you just said earlier is like you went through the stages of grief.
Yes, and some are longer than others. And don't believe everything you read. I read 17 books. I filled so many journals because I'm analytical, and it was difficult for me to express feeling going through this transition now because at the same time my dad gets sick. He moves in with me. He's in the hospital, and a couple months later he dies. So I've got his
and COVID
death.
Hit prior.
And so that was my third. And then in the middle, my mother-in-law from my first marriage, she died. So I never really grieved Jay. And then as soon as I think I'm making progress on Jay, then, Aileen goes. As soon as I think I'm making progress on the both of them, then my dad, he goes. And it was during the time that he was living with me that he told me the story about the 10-year-old girl.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we were alone. We'd sit there and, hang out. Me and my dad. Yeah.
What do you think you learned from that experience of grieving?
When you go through something, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or a loss of somebody, you learn really quickly or over time, but relatively quickly, what's important to you. Who is important to you? And what are you doing about your life that makes a difference not only for you, but for those of you around you? And are you being the example that, you could say Jesus taught us or whatever faith you have? Are you being that which you are being taught in the spiritual realm or religious realm? And so you just have to get really, really centered on that. And my question was, what is mine to do? What is mine to do? And at that point, I was coaching a real estate class on teaching people how to wholesale. I closed that down.
A profitable business then?
Yeah.
A for-profit business, I mean to say.
Mm-hmm. I was doing rehabs and rentals. Closed all that down. I realized that I could never make a housing impact doing 12 rehabs a year at 3-bedroom, 2 baths. I wasn't making a housing impact. Yeah, I was selling affordable housing, but I was impacting maybe one family. How can what is mine to do? How can I help build affordable housing by utilizing my skills and doing the hard things that people can't do? Hard things for other people are really easy to me. Like writing a dissertation was super easy to me. And I love doing it. And research, I love it. It's just, we're all wired differently and we all got in different lines for different gifts. Okay, but ask me to fix a light bulb, I struggle.
I'll take the light bulb.
Yeah. So it was, what is mine to do? And who do I want to do it with? And who do I want in my circle? And then how do I do this? And who needs to be on a team? Who needs to be on my team? And who's going to support the same ideals and vision and mission, accountability, integrity? Who has those same values to promote, to live in a world that's kind of a little bit upside down now, a little chaotic right now. And it's always, what is mine to do? And then one day I just woke up and said, affordable housing, any way it looks. And then I said, oh, tiny houses. Okay. That's what I did.
And then it became a non-for-profit because part of what's going through my mind now is you had the aroma shop, a business that was doing well and that you enjoyed and that you were creating an impact on. And then you get called into service and you close the business down. You have these other 2 businesses where you're building and renovating homes and you're teaching courses and again, making an impact. And you go through this grieving process and learn that these aren't serving you or serving the people around you. And so you close them down and then to start a non-for-profit. I'd like you to expand for everyone on the strength, the courage, the thoughts that you had to have in order to take all of these steps in a direction to not just serve yourself, but to serve the people around you.
I had a counselor. She was great. People shouldn't be in counseling forever, and she gave me homework to do, and I love homework. And I think that was from the analytical part of my brain that really set the course. And it was the journaling and just constantly thinking, what do I love in life? And why did I love Jay so much? And what was it that we did together? And what makes you laugh? What helps people? What have I done in my life that has been helpful to people? And is it courage? It's definitely strength, because you can get up in the morning and you cannot get up in the morning, because when you're going through grief, there were days that there were like 3 or 4 days that I didn't get out of bed. I lost a lot of weight and just didn't, I was lost. And so I had one friend, his name, by the way, is Jay, and he was my bike buddy, and he'd drag me out and go for a bike ride. And that was okay. And it was gradually getting back integrated into life, but I don't know what the defining moment was. I do remember sitting there meditating. I was done meditating and I looked up and I opened my eyes, and the room where I was so much brighter and clearer and colorful. And I'm thinking, wow, what's going on? And so I called the doctor and she says, oh, Michele, that's what they call the fog of depression. And I said, oh, that's what I've been going through for the past 21 months. I wrote it down, the date. It was June 13th, 2021, that I came out of this. And ever since then, it was very clear. Then I went back. It was like a switch went on in my brain. And then I was like, okay, now I shortlisted the people. I shortlisted the things that I wanted to do. I cleaned out just about everything and kept those things that I still haven't dealt with yet. And I'm very cautious now of staying in my lane and doing what is mine to do. Like, for instance, there's a distinction between homelessness and people that work. If the people that work don't have housing that they can afford, they become housing insecure. And when they're housing insecure for so long, that's how they slide into homelessness. Homelessness needs a lot of wraparound services, counseling, job things, whether it's a drug addiction or whatever. They need more help than this group over here of just affordable. They just need a place to live and a good job. So when I say other people will come to me, they'll say, my business is homelessness. Can you do X, Y, and Z? That's not my lane. My lane is over here. It's not that I don't care about that. It's just that I know what is mine to do, and I make a greater impact over here. And so that's what I became very, very clear on. Yeah.
I think it's so important to be clear on what we're doing. That clarity in business, we look at it in terms of like focusing on certain verticals or certain industries, and really when you hone in on that vertical or that industry or what you're talking to, you can make a greater impact because you go from being somebody who's good at everything to being an expert at something. And when you're an expert at something, you can 10x that, you can 20x that, and then you can become a leader in that industry, a thought leader, someone like yourself, to where people start following you, and now you multiply yourself and you multiply your resources, and you create that bigger impact. And I think to your point, then what happens is that then it bleeds into those other places of the impact that you're creating with affordable housing, bleeds into homelessness, bleeds into all these other, the affluent communities as we just discussed earlier. And so it kind of like, they overlap.
Yeah.
But you're focused in that one lane. I think that's really wonderful. You also developed some great habits, maybe prior to the grieving process or even after. But you were mentioning about how doing your morning routines and your daily routines are so important to your day.
Yeah. I never used to have one. Well, I had some, and then they don't stick. We talk about lifestyle changes. They don't stick. When this happened, I said I was most centered when I was doing a spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for people. And there's the religious part of it, getting in tune with spirit. You can read the Bible, you can pray, you can meditate and not think of anything. There's several different modalities. So I kind of took a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and I took The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I took, you said 10X by Grant Cardone, the 1 Minute Manager. I went and read all these like micro working kind of books, and took
4-hour work week.
Yeah, I read that too. Yes, and The One Thing by Keller.
Keller Williams. Yep.
Yep. So I took every great thing out of those, and I combined it with this spiritual thing. In the Miracle Morning, Elrod says, to do 10 minutes of sit-ups or push-ups. Well, I'm not going to do 10 minutes of sit-ups because I'm going to go ride my bike and do like 1 million sit-ups later. Anyway, So I just, every morning when I get up, I have this ritual. You make the coffee, you go and you do some aspect of spirituality, then you do your journaling, and then I might look at my schedule and say, what's the highest thing that will get me the best thing, the one thing that's going to get me the furthest today out of all these things. And that's what you get up and go do that, Michele.
Yep.
And I might be there when I'm in a hurry, it might be 10 minutes. It might be 40 minutes. But when I don't have that morning now, I'm like off,
Yeah.
kind of scattered.
It's funny that you say that. It resonated with me. I began doing these different habits as well. And another a good one, James Cleary, Atomic Habits.
I did that one too.
A great one. And I started putting in place very similar rituals of waking up, having my morning coffee, not looking at my phone. I don't look at my phone until I'm done with my morning ritual, call it that. Waking up, doing that, some mental gratitude. I used to write, I used to journal it. But then I do go to my stationary bike indoors, and some mornings I'll listen to one of my books that I read all my books through Audible. I should probably get paid for that. I mentioned it so many times on the podcast.
I do too. So you should get paid twice.
Right? Or sometimes I'll be journaling on my bike. I have an app on my phone that I'll journal with, and I only, when I pick up my phone, that's the only thing I'll do. I won't look at the emails or the text messages or any of that. All of that is off and on silent. So, and I'll journal. And where I'm going with this is so that's part of my morning routine. And then other things start taking place. So obviously I just mentioned exercise as well and all of that. But then other things in life, in my day happen and begin to happen. So that's very important to me. Oh, and then I meditate. And then after all of that, I go and I shower and I meditate in the shower and everything, and close my eyes and listen to a meditation app, and go through all of that. So where I'm going with this is that on the weekends, that gets turned upside down. I have 2 young daughters. I have Denise and Tenley, who are 5 and 7, and they have their activities. And now we think that we're giving ourselves a pass. We think that we're saying, hey, you know what? You've been good all week. Why don't you just go ahead and enjoy your coffee and just jump into the day? And you are so right in that. When I don't do that routine, those habits, my day is so different. My patience is so different. Yeah. Everything is different, to the point to where now I actually do still wake up at the normal time. I try not to, quote unquote, sleep in on the weekends, because it doesn't help me. No. That extra sleeping in doesn't do anything for me. It's counterproductive. To the point where, no, waking up and meditating and exercising and journaling or listening all helps me be a better dad throughout the day, a better person throughout the day.
And all those skills, they're ingrained in you, so that when you do have a horrific tragedy or whatever, you have something, whether it's your faith and hope and belief and trust, whatever it is, to rely on to get you through that.
Yeah. I'm not religious any longer. I was raised Catholic, and my mother's very religious. And I remember a long time ago, I was experiencing panic attacks and a lot of just uncertainty in my mind. And I remember her telling me that, that's why there's prayer beads. And because she's very smart about, she's religious, but not to the point where she doesn't see it objectively. Like you've mentioned it very objectively as well recently in this podcast. Where she said, hey, look, I know you don't pray. I know you don't do any of that stuff, but there's a significance to prayer beads. There's a reason why the rosary or the beads are important, because you have that tangible aspect. You're praying, and when you're praying, you're emptying your mind, really, right? Because you're reciting a Hail Mary or an Our Father, or any other prayer out there. Those are the ones that I know, obviously, because I was raised Catholic. And when you're reciting them, you're clearing your mind. So what I think people confuse with meditation is that they think that your mind just goes blank. And that's not true. Your mind has thoughts. But what prayer does, or meditation, or breathing exercises, or all of these different focusing on certain things, what it does is it allows you to kind of not go down that rabbit hole of that trauma or of that anxiety or of that problem, and then allows you to kind of find a different space and create space in your mind to where you realize, this isn't so bad. Right. I'm all right.
I'm going to be all right. Yes, it is. That's why they're called worry beads.
Worry beads. Oh, I like that one. Right. There's so many different interpretations. I love the phrase, what is mine to do? Where did you come up with that? You said it came from somewhere for you, or it just came to you?
It just came to me.
It came to you.
What is mine to do? That
needs to be your bumper sticker. I love that. What is mine to do?
I don't know. And then a couple months later, I don't know. Somebody said, "Oh, there's a Facebook group that focuses on
yes. Tell
and
us
I was
about
like,
this.
really? I don't know. I went on and I signed up, and I'm not on social media like I used to be because it's distracting me, and so I don't get into. So they do. Somebody started it. What is mine to do? But it's about what is mine to do.
And then I understand that you actually did start a Facebook group.
Yes, it's called
From zero to
yep.
over 1,000.
We're at about 1,600 right now. Yeah,
in a month.
Yeah, it has no advertising, and we're focused on. I'm not focused on. It's called Tiny House Communities DE. It's a Facebook group, and the difference in our group is that we don't tell you what kind of toilet to buy or how to build a roof or the structure of your tiny house. I don't do any of that. What we focus on is things in the community that is happening, whether getting us to tiny houses or away from tiny houses. And
so it's informative.
It's very informative, and there's no selling, there's no bashing, there's nothing. And it's, when there's volunteer opportunities, somebody puts them out. When somebody's raising money for a charity, they'll put that up there, but it's very educationally focused. Every time county council will do something, I put it on there. We had the housing summit on Wednesday. I put it on there, a little history on that. When I'm at county council, I'll put my briefing on there. Just a lot of stuff to just get people knowing that there's always something behind. It's not just putting a house up. What are all the things that need to be done first?
So helping them get involved, and so the people that are there, they want to be involved in some capacity.
Yes, and then one of the questions is, do you want to be involved? And so some of them want to make curtains for tiny houses. I mean, you get everything from that to the architect who wants to volunteer, and everything. Some people are funders. Some people, I know who they are because they go in and they tell me what they want to contribute. Now I have a database, so when my policies are changing, I've got a database of 1,000 people that said, I'm ready to go, and here's my skill.
Well, we want to Den 10 Insurance wants to help you with the insurance then aspect of it. We'll talk about that off air some more, I guess. Mm-hmm. In terms of this organization that you've founded, and that is a non-for-profit, how can people get involved? How do people get involved? And I think another question that I have, and I'm sorry for unloading so many questions at once. I don't typically do that, but this other one came to mind: is how is it profitable for someone like you to where you can afford your own home? Yeah.
So we talked about dirt to keys, and what that is dirt, land, parcels, going through policy, funding, finding builders, getting the house built, inspections, all the way to turning keys over to either a renter or an owner. So there are several different aspects. Those for-profit businesses, they are still available, and they do pieces of those development things. So it's where in the process do you need help? Do you need help at the dirt? Or do you need help with the keys? Or do you need help with the whole thing? So each part of those is a profit center. Finding parcels, maybe wholesaling a parcel, maybe selling it.
A profit center for the non-for-profit.
Yes,
I understand. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're not looking for donations, although I'm sure you accept.
Yes, we do. Yes,
sure
we do donations,
but it's self-funded through what you're talking about now. I just wanted to clear that.
Yes, and my number one thing that I am the best at is research and policy. And so people get a hold of me just to do a research study for them on their community. I do a lot of speaking engagements. That's another way that I get out and educate. And I love doing those because people, like, the lights go off. You can see it. It's really great. And so those are profitable. And that is, I guess, a salary that you can, do.
Garner from it. Yep, sure.
Yeah. And our website is dirttokeys.com, and that'll be up here shortly. We've gone through so many transitions on the website. In fact, I had to put that aside in my grief process. So that's, a lot of people ask me that. And then when you get to selling the house, there's a profit in there. What if you sold your movable tiny houses? What if you rented out your land? So there's various different ways of profit centers.
There's profit centers built into the non-for-profit, which is how you can afford a life as well.
Right.
There's a really great TED talk on non-for-profits. I don't know if you've seen it. No? Okay. I don't remember the name of the gentleman, but he was just speaking about how non-for-profits, it's still important that somebody who is a founder of a non-for-profit, somebody who works in a non-for-profit, that they also can afford their lifestyle and live the air quote American dream. Just because you're devoted to a non-for-profit and spend your time and life helping others doesn't mean that you don't deserve a healthy lifestyle as well. So I just wanted to...
You can only have an income to make a greater impact.
Right.
And so that's one way. I mean, I'm not talking, I'm the greatest real estate investor that ever lived. That's not what I do. That's not what I want to be.
Right.
But I want enough money to always fund my
something,
program,
a project.
something.
Yeah. You can only, the more you have, the more you can fund. I think is really great.
Yep.
Something we didn't get to really talk about, and I'm just going to just briefly state here, is that you got your degree on University of Phoenix, which is an online university. And something I want to share with the audience here is I think you can tell how brilliant you are, how smart you are, how dedicated you are, and how an online degree can be just as useful, just as beneficial, and maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more, than going to a brick and mortar.
Yeah, and in some ways it's more difficult to do it online.
Sure.
Because usually when you go to school, unless you do a night school or whatever, but usually when you're in school, that's what you do. You're in school, you get a stipend, you don't work. The University of Phoenix has both online and in person. So some of the courses I took online and some I took in person. And I found that my online learning was of higher quality because I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. Some people are not able to do that. And then the in class, you do a lot of group activities. So there's 5 of you. 3 of you do the work, and the other 2 get the A.
They're just there for the degree, yeah.
Yeah. But would I do it again? I would definitely do it again, and I did it again. I got my PhD online at Walden University, and they made me take all the courses again. So I had like a year and a half of courses. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have all this life experience, and you're going to teach me about the Constitution? Anyway, so... there was some study that was done, and it showed that people that do an online are more focused because they have a family. They have a job. They only have X period of time during the day to do this reading or assignment or research or whatever. And then they go and they do it again. And that's why sometimes it takes adults, a longer time to get a PhD finished. Because usually you're working. They're very rare unless you're a university, although if you're already in a university and then your university pays for it. But usually you're footing the bill on that.
Yeah.
So I love online training. And what I really like about it is, one, you could do it in your bunny slippers. But 2, the chats, you can chat away with somebody in the group. And not even listen to what is going on. So, it was more fun, actually, than being in person.
Oh, you got to be the distracting student behind the scenes.
Yes, I was. But nobody saw the private chats and messages. Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny. What the significance I put on that, and I'm glad you highlighted the other one. The 2 that I would put on that is, 1, that learning can take place anywhere if you're really in tune with it. So I want because our listeners can be anywhere from a high school person all the way to somebody in their 30s, 40s, 50s who's trying to figure it out. And I want us to understand that there's no limitations.
Right.
That you can do it with an online. The other side to what you just mentioned is about the focus in that. if you want to learn something and you really focus on it, it doesn't need to take 4 years.
Right.
It could take a lot less time.
Yep.
And when you dedicate your time to it, you could learn. I learned online. Like most of the stuff that I know now has been through YouTube videos, has been through Audible, has been through podcasts. That's where I've learned. I'm an audio learner. I'm a learn by example type of person. Classroom settings weren't the best for me. I was very distracted. I was also one of the distractions. But, what I learned is that when I decided that I wanted to learn more about business, about entrepreneurship, about podcasting, about all this other stuff that I'm doing, I was focused. And online allowed that.
Yep. Yeah. And you mentioned the kids that are, still in high school, they're transitioning maybe to a college age. Not everybody needs to go to college.
Right.
And
they might not be ready for it yet.
Oh, yeah. And then what I would have done differently is I probably would have done a year at a community college to get all those math and science, the 101s out of the way and not pay, extraordinary prices for them. But one of the things that we're going to see in society coming up is that we're not going to have plumbers or electricians or sheetrock hangers. Where's our trade schools? So one of the things that we had a conversation with about 3 weeks ago is about forming, okay, so now we're talking about all these steps, dirt to keys. What steps in the process do we need tradespeople? And how can I offer mentoring? You said follow your mentor, mentoring in each one of those. And I facilitate my Real Estate Investor Association meeting. So not only do I do the elected officials, now I'm training real estate investors, small people like me. You might do 12 or 15 or 20 rehabs a year, and it's not making a dent in the problem. Come over to my side in affordable and find your niche in the affordable housing space. And in that, get one of those kids, whether it's a 25-year-old kid, it doesn't matter, and mentor them, show them how the drill works, the difference between the drills, why are you using this drill over that, etc. And you're also building something.
Right.
So my now real estate investors are engaged in learning, they didn't even know what affordable housing was. Affordable housing only means that you spend more than 30% of your income on housing. They thought it was Section 8. So it's interesting how your brain, you say a word and your brain thinks something else, just like the affluent.
Sure.
Oh, I'm going to have affordable housing in my neighborhood. It's going to decrease my rent or my property value. It's going to bring in drugs. All that's not true. So anyway, it's the same thing. So now I have this other focus of my real estate investors and having them shift not only their activity of 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but how can you build duplexes or quads or townhouses or tiny townhouses? There's what's called a missing middle. It's everything from single-family houses to big house, like not only big house, but high-rise. What's in the middle? That's what's called the missing middle. That missing middle isn't always allowed because of policy. But if you can do duplexes, if you can change a person's house, like an elderly person who had 5 bedrooms, she's only living in one of them, why doesn't she rent out to these millennials? And then she's got her groceries taken care of, and they'll do her shopping for her, and they'll fix the toilet when it breaks. So there's a generational disconnect, and why not connect it through housing and helping out each age group. So anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that.
No,
so
great.
Bringing in the real estate investors to work and think about housing in a different way and making it affordable by making it smaller and using small-scale development and incremental development by taking one block at a time. And then engaging the community too.
I think there's a thing about language, educating people on the language that's being used, some education there. that can certainly be done through marketing.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that the marketing has been done on the other side in order to make us think of affordable as bad, as you mentioned. So marketing, I'm sure, can be used in the other respect. So with that in mind, I want to give a little shout out to Summer, who got us in touch with each other and over at 10X, 10X Speakers. So I think that there's some work that could be done there to help just changing, as you said, the mindset. Because once you change that mindset, the people have the power. They don't realize it, but they do. In that the policy. The people who have the ability to change policy, if the people in a community want it changed, they'll change it because they want those votes if they're in any type of seat, right?
Yes.
So it's really just about language and getting that out to the population and to those communities of understanding what this means, affordable housing, and how it'll impact them, and getting them to come together as a community to be able to affect this change. I think I love the work that you're doing, and I love the idea of bringing a community together, and there's so many ways we can do it, and you're doing it. As we kind of conclude some of the conversation, but also the grief stage, you had an opportunity at a certain point, which you named as probably one of your most challenging moments, and it's incredible that this is the most challenging because you've experienced so many challenges, and you've been so strong to be able to overcome these challenges and still see your plans through. Obviously, some of it came out of the grief too, but your victim impact statement was what you had mentioned as your most challenging moment.
Yeah. So every time there's a victim in a crime, that victim can go to the judge and make a statement what they think should happen to the perpetrator. Okay. So that I didn't even know what a victim impact statement was. I had to Wikipedia it. So I postponed it. I knew I had to do this thing. I postponed it. I procrastinated, and I'm not a procrastinator. I did not want to do this because I was doing well. It wasn't past the fog, but I was doing better. And it was during COVID, and I didn't want to write it. I just could. I'm like sitting here remembering exactly where I was, and I said, Michele, it's tomorrow. You got to write it. And I didn't want to wing it because I didn't want to break down emotionally in a courtroom, because I would have been like, when you're doing one of those crying. Yeah, it would have been one of those. So I said, I really got to put this on paper. So I got up that morning and I typed it up. I didn't even read it as a draft. I printed it out in 14-pitch font, and I went to the courthouse. And the gentleman that hit my husband was 89. And now this is like a year and a half later that I'm in court. So think of your 91-year-old. When you were 7 years old, 91 was really old, with the cane and everything. That's what it was. Anyway, the judge called me up, and I read this thing, and I got to one point, and I told what kind of a great guy Jay was, and I got, the court was laughing. I told him a few jokes about Jay, and then I got back on point, and I just looked. I didn't even know if it was in my script. I looked at him, and I said, Judge, I am in no way in a position to ever judge someone else. And I am thankful that I am not that man. And I said his name because he has to live with that. He has to live with that. And to me, that's bigger than any kind of sentence you could ever give to him. And then I got back. Gosh, I mean, I can like feel it as if I were in that room. So I don't even know. I picked up the speech again. And at the very end, I talked about that drivers don't always know about pedestrians or cyclists because they're driving. And it's our policies that we're an auto-centric community that allow people to kill people and get off with it. Even though it was an accident, I got that. Sometimes it's not. And that's how I finished it, about that I was still advocating for bike safety. I mean, that's what Jay would have done. That's what we did do together. We did little safety stops where we would tune up their lights or brakes, and we'd put lights on the front, lights on the back. We'd give them helmets. We put tape, a reflector tape on their bikes for kids. It was a summer project. My bike club did that with the Department of Transportation. I mean, think about that. A bunch of volunteers working with DOT. Yeah, to do bike safety. It was amazing. So anyway, I mentioned that was part of my life right now. And the judge, I remember, I thought he was going to say something right away, and he didn't. He just stared at me like you're staring at me, And I was like, am I supposed to put my mask back on? My little voice is going off at this point. And then my little voice is saying, I got to get out of here. I want to run out of this thing. I'm going to scream in a minute. So he had some nice words to say about, that Jay was an amazing person, because he was. And then that, it's good that there's people in this community that advocate for that pedestrian type of modalities for transportation, because some people commute on their bikes. So anyway, that was the hardest thing I think I ever did, because I was in huge loss for my buddy Jay, and then to look over to
see the person.
Yes, and I could tell he aged and he was already old. And I could see that he aged. And then he just recently died, I want to say 6 months ago. He died. Yep.
Was there any, forgiveness or closure for you in that moment or after that moment?
I had forgiven him.
Prior?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't mad at him. I was mad at the way that the intersection was. And they've redone that intersection because of Jay. And I have a white bike. They're called ghost bikes. I put that up there so people slow down and pay attention. And it's right on the side the road where he got hit. And it's got a big, a big sign about him and rules of the road. It's got this side as rules of the road.
Sure.
And then in the back, it's got our bike trails. I got there's Realtor, where they stuff this information in the container. So that's full of bike information.
Cool.
Yeah. So I was mad about that. And I was mad at the system because we don't charge people appropriately for doing stupid things with a vehicle. Meaning texting, and you get off on a slap. What if that was a serious, significant consequence if you killed somebody? You would be a different driver. You wouldn't be texting if you knew you were going to spend, I'm making this up, 20 years in jail or whatever it's going to be.
Right.
Or, a $10,000 fine or something significant. And so I never was really mad at him because I would never want to be him. And so I just never really, I didn't have to forgive him because I never did anything. You
didn't feel he did anything wrong to be forgiven for?
Yes, because it wasn't completely his fault.
Right. The way
and it was the system. And why would an 89-year-old need an Escalade, a brand new Escalade?
Right.
Those are big cars.
Yeah, big cars. And I think what you're speaking to as well is just the renewing of the license without.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
yes.
Major issues there. I've had some insureds where their license have been revoked due to accidents, and they've asked me, do you think I can go back and get it renewed? And I said, if it was revoked, just leave it alone,
Yes.
man. I mean, this
Yes.
is, to me, when I'm speaking with a client about that, I'm looking at them as their life. I'm saying, your life. But yeah, of course, there's somebody else's life at risk too. But but just speaking to that person to person is, is saying, hey, look, this is your life at risk as well.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be driving. But anyway, it's interesting because it goes to policy, as you said, and there's so many outdated and there's so many that need to be revamped. And I'm sure that some of that could be spoken about on another episode here at the Michael Esposito Show. I'm glad that we got to speak about Jay. I'm glad that this has been a journey for you that didn't happen too long ago. It's so recent. And so, I want to, of course, share this with, my condolences with you. And of course that it's important that we share these stories. The vulnerability in these stories is, I think, sometimes what drives us forward and what helps others on the other end that are listening here get through what they're going through in whatever circumstance they're in. And understand that, look at you. You're a successful woman who is making a huge impact on her local communities, on her global communities, and you've experienced loss and you've experienced grief, and yet you're still going and you're still doing it. And so anybody who's listening, who's experiencing anything, here's a person right here in front of me, Michele, who you can learn from and who you can, take a little bit from in your day and appreciate and show gratitude.
Yeah,
to.
gratitude is a big one. That's what I journal about.
Well, in closing here, your mantra or inspirational quote that you live by, you said, be grateful for everything.
Everything.
What's everything?
Did you stub your toe this morning? Oh, I guess you need to clean your floor. Oh, okay, thank you. Everything.
You have a floor.
Have food. Yeah, you have a floor. It's not dirt. You have a roof over your head. You
had furniture to stub your toe on.
Yes, you have water to go rinse off if it bled, plus a Band-Aid to put on it. I mean, when I was deployed to Africa, Benin, these people had nothing, and they were the happiest people I ever met.
Tell us about that.
Oh, I was a medical squadron. I was a commander of a joint forces task force that went down. They were doing security, and we were doing... it was all the services. And we were doing health, think of a big health fair. And we were giving out vitamins and minerals and pharmaceuticals, and we were giving out worm medication like it was M&Ms. Wow. All these kids and moms had worms, and it would have taken it takes 3 or 4 treatments to get rid of them. Those big stomachs, they don't know any better. And here's a bottle of water. Yep. We had to drink water from here because it was polluted. Cholera. Right. And they would take these empty bottles.
Fill them in the river.
No, they used them as toys.
Oh.
And the more they got, you would think that I just gave them a brick of gold.
Yes.
And things like that, just
But the cholera comes from the drinking water.
Yes.
Just to understand my remark there.
Yes. No, I got that. Yeah. But this was a toy to them. And then, we would get... meals ready to eat, MREs, and they were all meat-based. So I'd give mine away. And it was difficult because which of these 1,000 kids do I give it to? So we all piled them together, all of our excess food, put them in a big old box, and let the community divvy it out because we would have had mass chaos. We didn't speak the language. It was French, a little bit of a French weird dialect, and none of us spoke French. So that was a learning experience. The mayor came out, the ambassador came out. There was a huge lot of press on that one. But the most significant thing was how happy people are with nothing. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me was, and it's a societal thing, those women start to have babies at age 13. And that's why there's so many of them, and then they don't stop. And the men aren't anywhere to be found. Are capable to help and to do. Yeah, it's incredible. But I think in that story, what you were sharing is just the gratitude that they have for life
and the enjoyment of just being able to be in their community, and the gratitude for you and your and the military to be able to come there and help them and serve them and give them the medicine and the food and the toys that they were able to make from some of the tools and things that you used. It's so important, I think, to be grateful for what we have. I speak about it all the time. Just that's my driving force is seeing the need in the world and understanding that, what am I worried about today, right? Like why, what in my day is really that bad that I can't get over it, right? I mean, yeah, of course, in circumstances it is bad, right? And it does suck, and we experience these things, and don't take away from that, but understand that there's so many people in need, and so just to be grateful for what you have. So I love that.
The more you focus on that gratitude, the more of the great things that you get. Whether, it's the law of attraction,
Yeah.
What you focus on, you get more of.
You get more of, yeah.
Focus on love, you get more love. Focus on money, the abundance of money, you get more money. And money doesn't always come in currency. It comes in, somebody gave you a free jacket or whatever.
Right.
Comes in different things.
In different ways. So please share with us how people can get in touch with you, how they can help, how they can get involved.
Yeah, okay. So like I said, my website is coming alive here shortly. It'll be DIRT to Keys, DIRT to KEYS.com. And on there will be a whole bunch of ways to participate. The other thing is if you need a speaker, if you need somebody to help you navigate through council or political things, let me know. If you and how you can get a hold of me is Michele, Michele, at COBA, COBAUS.org. So Michele at COBAUS.org. And you got to start by knowing what your problem is before you fix it, and that's where the research comes in. So that's my email and my web address. And for tiny houses, it's Tiny House Communities DE on Facebook.
Yep. And you're also on LinkedIn.
I am LinkedIn.
All of that stuff will be up there. And you have a goal to live to 100 years old. So
at least.
At least.
At least, yes. Because think about it. I got a lot to do.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, when you really think about it, affordable housing didn't get here overnight.
I got to change my goals.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you get there and further, and you have my blessing on that. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to also just highlight here that you drove up from Delaware,
Sussex County, Lewis,
to Poughkeepsie. Got a bed and breakfast in the Hudson Valley to come on the show today. Yep. And you got to walk on the walkway bridge this morning.
And that was amazing. I'm so glad you texted that to me, because the colors of the trees and everybody on the path and the bridge was so happy, and they were talking, and some people were alone like me, and some people had families, and it was just so lovely. It was great. And I'm really thankful for that, because that was an opportunity that I didn't know about. And so if you didn't tell me, so that was abundance.
Well, I'm glad I texted it to you this morning. Yeah, it's a beautiful space, and I just want to thank you so much for traveling and being here in person with me.
Yeah, thank you. It was very fun.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, very fun.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.